Today's video, we have some trade talk around the Leafs, the Senators, and the Penguins, as well as the latest on Jacob Chychrun in Arizona. We have a big signing in Florida, potentially a first suspension of the NHL season, and some injury news and other tidbits from around the league. All that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a variety of NHL news and rumors today. Let's get started with our potential first suspension of the NHL season. The NHL Department of Player Safety does have a hearing set up with Seattle Kraken player Jacob Melanson, who is being called for interference/legal check to the head. He came in against the Edmonton Oilers. It was a really late hit and primarily made head contact. So I really do imagine he will have a suspension coming, so we will see where that goes. Obviously, there's still enough preseason action that I don't imagine it'll impact things for the regular season. I'm not sure how they're going to handle that exactly, but either way, Jacob Melanson in Seattle is facing a suspension, which is likely going to be probably a 1 to 2 gamer at most. Big signing in Florida today. The Florida Panthers have extended young goaltender Spencer Knight on a 3-year deal valued at $4.5 million per season. A little bit surprised. I'm not shocked that they extended him at all. He's a great young goaltender, but between his contract that he's just been extended here, and of course Sergei Bobrovsky, that's already on the books for $10 million, that puts them starting next year at $14.5 million just for their goaltending duo. That's a lot of cash. I think that's the most expensive one for a duo in the NHL that we've ever seen, if I'm not mistaken. So I wonder what this means for the future. I really can't help but wonder what it means for Sergei Bobrovsky. Obviously, this season could be a very telling season on how things are handled. I'm also a little bit surprised that we see Spencer Knight, get a little bit more money than a guy like Jake Ottinger. At the end of the day, he's a first-round pick with a ton of potential, and obviously this contract, I think, is one of those typical contracts we've seen with a lot of younger players lately getting ready to come out of an ELC. That's more about their projected future production or future results than it is about what they've already done. He hasn't really even played that many NHL games, at least with a guy like Jake Ottinger, who just got a 3-year extension in Dallas. Had a remarkable playoff series last year, certainly a bit of a coming out party on top of more games in the regular season before that. So certainly, a well-deserving goaltender. It just seems a little surprising that he was able to get more money than some other more established goalies. It makes the Thatcher Demko deal in Vancouver look pretty good for sure. It's similar to like the Carter Hart contract, Ottinger, etc. And his Knight already into those categories. Well, I guess time will tell. At the end of the day here, wouldn't be shocked after this season if the Florida Panthers do really push hard to find a way to move on from Bobrovsky, unless he absolutely tears it up this year and wins a Vezina or something like that, which the way he's played in Florida since he's gone down there would surprise me. I mean, at the same time, though, if you look at his first season of that 7-year deal, it was pretty bad. And things have gradually gotten better in year 2 and then a little bit better again in year 3. Of course, they've really yet to experience a whole lot of playoff success, so that'll probably play a role too. Real curious to see how it goes. One more year. He's got the next year. He's still got a big salary. Then the last 2 years it drops off. So these contracts will be matching for their expiration. And I do think that there's a good chance that by the time Spencer Knight comes up for renewal, that Bob won't be there anymore. Wouldn't be shocked if they consider or evaluate what a buyout might mean or a trade with salary retained or something. I don't know how that's going to work because he has full control. If he doesn't want to go, he doesn't have to. A buyout might be their only course of action, and that would be expensive. But if they waited one more year, it would drop down a lot in price because his salary for the final 2 years is not nearly as high as it was previously. So we'll see. We'll see. Hopefully Spencer Knight lives up to this deal. I think based on his potential future results that we expect to see based on the pedigree and everything that he's been drafted and shown so far, I think he'll be worth it. It's just if it wasn't for Bobrovsky. If it wasn't for the Sergei Bobrovsky contract, it would be less concerning. But we'll see how they handle their goaltending situation here after this year because it's going to be awfully expensive. Some injury news. The Vancouver Canucks, of course, already without Brock Besser for a while, is now going to be without Ilya Mikheyev, the newly signed free agent who came over from Toronto, is week to week. We knew he was injured. Originally, the only reports we had heard from the coaching staff was it didn't appear to be serious. But week to week at this point, to start the year on the right foot, is a little bit concerning. It doesn't mean he won't be ready for the opener. He could be. Most teams are going to have their first game and right around the 2-week mark from now, thereabouts. So just depending on how he goes. I mean, that might give him enough time, but if it goes on further, he may be in question. But at this point, we can say it's questionable, but perhaps more likely that he plays opening night. Travis Dermott also got hurt as well. So the injuries, we don't know further details. At least I haven't seen anything more on Dermott, but the injuries are starting to pile up quickly in Vancouver, and that's not how you want to start your season by any means. Maple Leaf captain John Tavares is also out. A minimum of 3 weeks with an oblique strain. So that's certainly not good news for the Leaf captain. Of course, that will mean he will miss time to start the regular season. It said minimum of 3 weeks. We got about 2 weeks of training camp and preseason left before the regular season gets underway. So he's in a minimum of a week of the regular season. Could be more. It depends on how long past that minimum 3 weeks he ends up taking before he's fully healed and ready to play. But that's certainly not good news there. Staying with the Leafs for a second, Austin Matthews, if you're a baseball fan, will be making an appearance. I believe it's tonight at the Toronto Blue Jays game to throw out the first pitch. So he'll be their guest tonight where the Jays take on the New York Yankees. Now, the Boston Bruins are set to honor former captain Zdeno Chara. Of course, he recently signed a 1-day contract to retire as a Bruin just a short time ago. They've announced that they are going to honor him on October the 22nd at our home game and have a ceremonial face-off. It's all fine and dandy. I think he should be honored. He was a tremendous captain. I think it was, 14 years or something he played there. Helped lead them to a Stanley Cup. They really should do a lot of honoring to Zdeno Chara. I just found it surprising that it's a ceremonial face-off. I have no doubt at some point they're probably going to retire his number, and we'll see 33 go to the rafters. I just wondered maybe what's the holdup? Why wouldn't they just go ahead and do it when they're going to do that? Because I would imagine it's not going to be too far into the future. Maybe they'll wait a year or two. I don't know. But anyways, good news, I guess, that they're honoring him. I was just a little bit surprised on the exact nature of what the ceremony was. I thought it might be something a little bit more extensive than that. Now, on to the other trade talk of the day. Jacob Chychrun. We'll start with him. Elliot Friedman and Jeff Merrick had a new 32 Thoughts podcast that came out in the last 24 hours or so, talking about a variety of things, including Chychrun. Elliot Friedman goes on to say that as much as the Ottawa Senators have been in the mix, that you could say the St. Louis Blues have been as well. The Blues are not a team that I've heard much about when it comes to Chychrun lately. They have been mentioned in relation to having interest in him in the past, but I haven't heard that team really mentioned much recently. A lot of the Chychrun stuff has really been all focused on Ottawa from a variety of NHL sources and insiders. So interesting to hear that the St. Louis Blues still have interest in Chychrun as well. And the other interesting point that Elliot Friedman made was that as much as the price remains high to get a deal done, that teams are kind of, I guess you could say, a little nervous, a little skeptical of making a big trade and giving up a lot of assets for a player like Chychrun, especially where he does have a bit of an injury history, and he's actually hurt right now, waiting to be healed up to play. And a lot of this stems from the Ryan Ellis situation in Philadelphia. Now, of course, he had a real solid career in Nashville, and look what happens when he gets to Philadelphia. He's played 4 games, going on his second season, and his career might be over. Now, of course, the Philadelphia Flyers, in my opinion, got a really good deal in that trade. I don't think they gave up any kind of assets that we're talking about, at least what the rumored price has been for Chychrun. I mean, they did move Nolan Patrick, his own career might even be over, who's also been not playing due to injury. So if they would have kept Patrick and he didn't play versus getting Ellis and he didn't play, you know what I mean? At least they're not, at least they didn't give up anything further for him. It's at least not like they have a player elsewhere flourishing, right? So I do understand. It does make sense. Teams are not going to want to give up like a solid 3 assets here, at least, and then find out that he gets hurt and he ends up a kind of career-ending, threatening injury or something like that. That would be a major blow. But Friedman and Merrick talk about the fact that it's kind of right now expected to be somewhere as equivalent to, like they said, like look at the old Brent Burns trade from way back when he was traded to San Jose. It was like the equivalent of 3 first-round picks. So they're not all first-round picks, of course, but like you could have at least 1 first-round pick, maybe a recently drafted first-round pick, and maybe a roster player that might be comparable to a first-round pick. So something to that effect would be the typical asking price right now in that trade. That's why it's believed that the Coyotes probably want 2 first-round picks where they're rebuilding, and then maybe at least one prospect that's equivalent to that of a recent first-round picked player. So like in the Ottawa rumors that we've talked about recently, there was a rumor that they really like Shane Pinto, of course, who was a recently highly drafted player. So he could be equivalent to one of those picks. And then they're looking for at least one more first and maybe even 2 or another first round quality prospect, which is it's a high price tag for Ottawa, which explains why they haven't pulled the trigger as of yet. And I can see the Blues being a little bit reluctant to do that as well. So we'll see if things change, but look for the Blues to maybe be in the mix there as well as the Senators. And it makes sense why teams are so reluctant, especially what they've seen going on with Ryan Ellis lately. Pittsburgh is a team as well that you might see a move from. Doesn't have to rush though, maybe closer to the end of training camp, but they're certainly amongst a group of teams that likely need to make a move to be cap compliant, but they may choose to basically to ice a smaller roster. There's some teams out there when you look at Cap Friendly or Puckpedia and you're looking at their cap situation, you'd be like, oh, they need to make a trade to be cap compliant. They need to make a trade. It's not always the case. I mean, if you look at how many players are showing on the roster at the time, sometimes they can just, put a player that's, either waivers exempt down in the minors, or perhaps even if it's not a waivers exempt player, they can put somebody through waivers and demote them and get some cap relief that way and go with a smaller roster. That sometimes works. And it might be a possibility here with Pittsburgh. I mean, they're looking at probably having to shed anywhere from $1.5 million to $2 million in cap space to become cap compliant on opening night. I did see some comments from GM Ron Hextall saying that they were looking at a variety of possibilities and different trades and scenarios that they were considering. So it does seem likely that they might, if they're going to make a trade, not only to be compliant, but to create less of a logjam, it's going to be on the blue line. I mean, the Penguins have more than enough defense. So we're talking Marcus Pettersson, I know, has been on the block for a long time. And of course, maybe a guy like Mark Friedman or Pierre-Olivier Joseph. Like they have like 8 quality NHL defensemen on that team that are either mostly on one-way contracts. So to me, you're likely going to see at least one moved. It would make sense if we see one guy traded, maybe one guy demoted. And I don't even think the 8 on the roster and cap friendly even includes Pierre-Olivier Joseph. So they have a lot there. So to me, a D trade involving the Pittsburgh Penguins makes sense. Of course, they get picked up Jeff Petrie in the offseason. It comes with a big contract. He's making more money than what we saw with Mike Matheson, who went the other way in that trade. So you got Letang on a new deal. Pricey, and of course you got Dumoulin, you got Petrie, you got Marcus Pettersson. Of course, they traded John Marino for Ty Smith, so he's in the mix there as well. You got Chad Rubeedle, so they have a variety of options. Like they don't need to do a ton. It doesn't have to be a higher valued contract. It could be a guy like Pettersson, but it doesn't have to be. They could very easily, like I said, maybe demote one forward and maybe move one defenseman or something. They have a lot of different ways they can go about this, but it certainly wouldn't be surprising at all to see Ron Hextall trade a defenseman before opening night. Now, when it comes to the Maple Leafs, they're another team like Pittsburgh that are going to be tough up against the cap. And I know we just talked about Leaf captain John Tavares being injured, so I would be, really probably want to suspect that anything they might do here might wait until beyond opening night, because I don't know, depending on what they want to do cap-wise, even if they have to ice a smaller roster or something. But the Maple Leafs, of course, like most teams, are out of cap space, are very tight up against it. So they still have to sign Rasmus Sandin. We don't know how that's going. I know it's not going well. It sounds like they probably are going to want to sign Zach Aston Reese, who's on a PTO, and that's going to be complicated. But with Tavares hurt, it makes it a little bit complicated on who might go. At this point, you got Jake Muzzin ailing a bad back on the back end. Timothy Liljegren's out for 6 weeks. And with Sandin unsigned, even if Sandin gets signed, I don't think they're going to move a defenseman. To me, that doesn't make sense. So you're looking at a forward group. If anybody is going to get moved, I've seen different articles suggesting that it could very well end up being Alex Kerfoot. Now, I guess a lot of the reasons why you would trade Alex Kerfoot would be the same reasons why you'd want to keep him. Obviously, you want to trade a player that's going to generate interest from other teams. You want to create a player who's that teams are going to want. And it's just that simple. Like, Kerfoot can play pretty much all 3 forward positions. He can play center and wing. He can play, a solid offensive game. He can also play a decent defensive game. He can kill penalties. You can put him in a variety of spots, which is why you like him, which is why you want to keep him. But it also means that he's valuable in that other teams would have interest too. So, at the same time, I don't know, because you're looking at Tavares being injured for a while. You got Pierre Engvall's injured for a little while, and it's just hard to say how they're going to go about the roster. If anybody ends up being out a little bit longer than expected, they might be able to use LTIR for the first month of the season and get around it that way, and then make a decision later, maybe closer to November. That's also quite possible. So we don't know how the Leafs are going to go about this, because we don't know the full extent of how everything is going to go here at the end of training camp as far as who's going to be kept on the roster, and is there any other injuries or anything like that. That's all going to be factored into play. But don't be surprised if a guy like Kerfoot might become a bit of a cap casualty, but I'm a little bit reluctant to say that that's overly likely. I think it's going to be, they might probably be able to start the season without doing a whole lot, see how things go, and I think we might see a move maybe within that first month, depending on how everything goes and getting everybody returned and signed. But the Sandin contract, though, it needs to get done before the season starts, or it's really going to be difficult cap-wise to navigate through things, because if you're not signed by then, there's a prorated cap hit, and no matter what you sign for, it's going to be a bigger AAV in the first year, and that is going to be a problem. Sandin's going to probably lose some leverage, because the Leafs are going to probably offer to pay him less than it's going to take what they're offering now, because it's going to take a smaller amount to make the numbers work. It's just that simple. But certainly look for these teams to be active here at the end of training camp, and there's going to be others too. But probably just a matter of the next couple of days before we start seeing more waiver wire activity. A lot of teams so far have only made cuts around junior players. We haven't really seen much of anything when it comes to other veterans being cut or put on waivers or released from PTOs or anything of that nature. That's likely going to start here over the next few days. So let me know your thoughts on everything discussed today down in the comments. We'll discuss further. Of course, if you're new to this channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news, rumors, and analysis on all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.